Now we're live.
You're right.
We are live. Okay, great. I am just seeing there. Okay, so we got 6 viewers in there at the moment, currently. So that's gonna keep building. So we'll give them a second just to join. Quite difference being back here in Ireland, I tell you. It's cold.
You're a brave man doing this on no sleep after a transatlantic flight last night.
So. Yeah, that is. Yeah. Well, listen, dedication to the cause, right? Deadly. Okay, we'll hop into it. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm just going to make sure that we are recording. I assume it's recording. Recording in progress. Okay, cool. Sweet. Okay, thanks to everyone for coming. This is one of our first webinars of the year. And I'm delighted to welcome here Tom Rowe from Opensend, as well as Tally, for one of our account managers here in Oaks. So one of the things that we're doing today is we're going to discuss a bit more about how we can build an always-on retention system. A lot of people that come to us and talk to us a little bit more about their email, they're sending a lot of one-off emails and they're not really getting a strategy behind it. And what we're going to go through today is a lot more into the detail of actually how you can build your brand on top of acquiring new customers, how you can actually retain them in a more strategic way, as opposed to sending individual emails on an ongoing basis and hoping they work and segmenting in the right way, etc. So we're going to talk a bit through that. Our partner with Opensend is going to talk a little bit more about how they help us collect more emails and actually get more people onto into our file and actually drive that retention system even before somebody has started purchase. We want to really focus on actually building that messaging, and that's really what we want to talk about today. So if there are any questions, let me know, but we'll kick off. So Tally, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, nice to meet everyone here. I'm Tally. I'm going to explain first what is a retention system and then why do we really need it. First of all, it's not just campaigns, it's not just flows. To really bring results here, we need to do a system, a really well thought system. It's not volume, it's a system. So basically what happens is if you only send flows or you only send campaigns, you're just doing half of the system. It's not a well thought thing. You're going to bring new people in, but you're not going to actually bring good results. So what you really want is to people who already bought with you, that they will come back and back again, and they will also tell their friends to come by with you. So easier than to do one thing, like sell one time and that's it. It's for you to bring them back to you. I would like to say that retention, it's the cheaper way to bring people back. If you do ads, you pay per ad, per recipient. If you do email, your cost is very low. So that's a very interesting thing to say. So basically, retention is not more emails, more flows, more campaigns. Retention is the system, is everything well thought together. New clients, they bring volume, but it's not cheap, let's say like that. It doesn't really bring profit. So retention does bring the profit. So what you need is you need ads, but this is just going to bring the person into your database. And then once you have them there, you really need to work with them to bring them back and back again. With retention, you have profit. That's the key.
Absolutely. And I think this is kind of what we're saying here is actually that, not just actually bringing people back. And as we said previously, it's not just sending more emails, it's actually being more thoughtful about who you're sending to and what you're sending as well.
Yeah. I actually had some clients in the past that they only wanted to do campaigns. So they did not have flows, or they worked on their flows once and then they kind of forgot about it. And I can tell you for sure, you do not have results with that. You're going to have small results, but that's not the profit you need. So if you have a really well thought thing, people are just going to come back to you.
Absolutely. Great.
Okay, so what's broken in most retention setups? Most brands, they do have flows running, but they're quiet in the background. We've seen clients that they have many different flows, like over 20 flows. They're just quiet there. They don't even bring revenue. So why do you have it there? You need to go back and do like a thing related to the campaigns and how you're talking to your clients and review it. That's very important. You can just forget about it. Also, campaigns send reactively to hit numbers. You're not only hitting numbers, sometimes you're creating a community that's very important. We've seen clients that have a really strong community. They actually send an email saying like, why don't you send more? Why don't you send me? I want to see like new cases, whatever. It's very nice to see their engagement with our emails. And one very important thing to say, if you have engagement in your email, so then it's going to deliver better to all the rest of them.
Absolutely. I think the other thing to say here as well is when you have those multiple flows running, it's important to understand the flow between, like the behavior between the flows. If somebody's getting multiple different flows, you look at it as getting revenue in individual flows, but think it from the consumer standpoint. There was one brand we worked with recently that they had all the flows that are left on, and actually when they started with new flows, they didn't exclude them from the old flows, and somebody might be getting like 14 to 20 different communications in one day because they send all the different flows in one go. It was absolutely crazy, but it's one of the key things I would say is one of the takeaways here is actually making sure that you're looking at it from a user point of view rather than just looking at what flows you can set up. So it's really important there as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing we are always careful with campaigns. I'm not just saying flows, I'm saying campaigns. You don't want to send many campaigns to the same person in the same day, but then sometimes you are being careful with that, but the flows just keep hitting them in the same day, many different emails. So that's why you need to have a system is strategy, basically. You need to have it all working together. Very well thought wheel.
Absolutely. Great.
Okay, you can. Yes. So what always on really means that you need system led, not calendar led. So for sure, campaigns are important, but they are not all. You need to do behavior driven, not batch based, and also designed to get better over time. So that's what we're saying. You need to have flows, and you probably already have them, but you need to work on them to get better and better. With campaigns, you're also going to understand better your clients, and then you can apply that into your flows as well. So flows are going to be quietly in the background, but you can't forget about them.
Talk to me, Tanya, about what is behavior driven as opposed to batch based. What are we talking about when we talked about behavior driven?
Because basically, let me explain what is the flow, first of all. The flow gets triggered when you get to a certain behavior. So for example, you left something in your cart, but you did not buy it. So the flow get triggered. So that's 100% based on your behavior. What you did in the website, if you search for a product but did not buy it, you're already going to start receiving emails from a flow. So that means what you do is going to change the flows you're getting. It's going to base the flows you're getting. Different from campaigns, but campaigns, we segment them. So for example, I'm only going to send this campaign to whoever bought this product in the past or whoever engaged with my emails in the last month. So everything is based on behavior. What you did is going to depend on what you're going to get from the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just on the system-led approach when it comes to the calendar, we're talking about a calendar-led approach. I suppose we do content calendars for our partners, and I think that's something to kind of highlight. It's not that we completely go away from a content calendar, but when it comes to a system-led approach, would that be more around the segmentation? Is that approach, or is there a messaging that you're talking about there?
Yeah, I think it's both. First of all, you do send messaging according to the calendar. So seasonal, special dates, special products, but also what people do, it's gonna guide us to what we're gonna send. So just to give an example here with one of our clients, usually everybody has one product that does not sell as good as other products. So based on people's behavior and then their behavior in the past, I'm gonna send them a new campaign talking about this product that do not sell well, but it could be selling.
Say again.
based on their behavior, I'm gonna send them a campaign, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that is talking about a product that is not selling very well, but based on their behavior in the past, I think like they could be buying it. For example, they bought a mini dresses on during winter. People don't buy as maxi dresses just because it's winter. But I saw you bought in the past a
Mm-hmm.
lot of mini dresses, so I could just send an email campaign to you showing you how to use a mini dress with boots and whatever, like styled to the winter. So based on your behavior, you're gonna get emails, campaigns, and the content is also gonna be based on that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's based on a system rather than
Yeah,
kind of sending a calendar. It's adaptable. Okay,
exactly.
great.
It's like a segment. You're not gonna send your email to all your lists, and that's something I've seen with many clients. They before they hire us, they're just used to send the email to everyone, and
Yes,
that's the worst thing you could do because you're basically destroying all your metrics. So segmenting is very important. That's
absolutely.
one of the things. Like if you are getting many emails from a brand in the same day or in the same week, and you're like, why are they sending me this? Like it doesn't even relate to me. It's because they're not segmenting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you could be part of multiple segments, for example. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So we talk a bit more about an always-on retention system then. So it's kind of three parts to it, I suppose. Is let's talk a little bit about this because this is kind of where it leads more into to Opensend in terms of actually keeping new people coming into the file and kind of how that works. So maybe Tali, talk us a bit more about a retention system that's kind of always
Sure.
on.
So we basically have three parts here. The first one, life cycle, backbone, flows. Again, you do need them, but they're not everything. The second part, nurture and momentum campaigns. So they are coming in to complete with the flows, but again, they're not everything. If you're only sending flows or if you're only sending campaigns, your system is not going to work. One helps the other, and one fixes the other as well. So with the results you have in the campaigns, you can fix things on the flows, and the opposite is also correct. And the last thing is optimization. So based on what you see with lifecycle and nurture momentum, you're gonna fix in the next emails you're sending. So test it, make it better. Emails, it's not like there's not 100% truth for all clients. You have to test it. Things change with time. One thing that works with one client, it's probably not going to work with another client. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it does not. So everyone is different. You really have to test it. I've seen clients in the past that the best way to sell for them was actually to send pre-launch emails. They sold better than the launch emails. So for every client, it changes. You have to test it. I love A/B testing everything. We've seen it in the past months, testing with our clients, and the results are just very crazy. Sometimes we are 100% sure that something is not going to work, and then we just get surprised by that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things that you have a strategy overall, but be prepared to be adaptable. Absolutely, it's very important. Great. So one of the things that we see a lot is that partners come to us and say, "Listen, we've got the campaigns unlocked, but we want to actually get some flows. We want to update our flows, a lot more. But they're not sending necessarily enough emails. So why is that? Like, why does that not work? Maybe that we can explain to the viewers why that's happening.
Okay, flows is a thing, as we said. You set it once and you leave it there. You for sure have to make it better and continuously review it. But it's different than a campaign that you do a new one every single day. It's not so personalized. For sure, you're talking to a person. For example, you left something in the cart and you did not buy it. So for sure, you're talking to a specific person. But it's not with real data from today, because sometimes it was made like a week ago or a month ago or even longer time than that. So campaigns, you can set it a campaign to send today about a topic that happened today. Sometimes you send related to things that happened in the world that are trending. You just add them to a campaign. So that's one thing you can't really do with flows. Also, they cover predictable moments, different than campaigns. They speak only when something happens. That's why we say it triggers when you get to a certain rule. So, for example, you left something in the cart. If the retention relies only on flows, the engagement is going to drop. That's why we have campaigns here to help us with engagement. Growth slows, and also messaging becomes repetitive. And that's the case you just said. Like, people keep sending, receiving. You can get to a flow again and again. So, for example, if you left something in the cart, you get a flow. If you leave something in the cart in 2 months from now, you're gonna get the same flow again. So that's why it's important to have campaigns, and that's why it's important for you to update your flows as well. But
Yeah.
so that's why we wrote here at the bottom, flows are necessary, very important, but they're not sufficient. They're not all.
Just on their own. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. So, I mean, campaigns are obviously then the compounding layer on top of that. Then, so this is kind of what you're saying is around building trust. So maybe talk to us a bit more about that layer that you build on top from a campaign standpoint.
So I told you flows are important, but they're not all. Campaigns are very important, but again, they're not all as well. We need both. So campaigns here are important because we are going to educate people about our brand, about our products. We've seen clients that they do talk about their products a lot, but they have a story. Like, the brand was built for a reason. They do their products in a certain way that it's very interesting. People nowadays, they love stories. They love to understand how things work. So we use the campaigns to really educate them, build trust, engage with them, tell the story behind the product, behind the brand. And then that's why we are bringing here this whole like system story. You can't just have one. So flows are important, campaigns are important. And if you do both together, very well thought, with a strategy behind it all, you're really going to bring better results for your brand.
Absolutely. Got a couple of good questions here across the board. So just on the when we're looking at testing new emails and new flows, I'm assuming Julie here has asked that question. The question is, what metrics should we be looking for when we're testing new flows?
So I would say depend on the flow for sure, and depend on what you're testing. So, for example, if you're testing subject line, you need to see the open rate. If you're testing design wise or the copy or something inside the email, so click rate is going to be very important. So it really depends on what flow you're talking about and what metrics are you testing. Sometimes we test long versus short email. So for sure, it's 100% based on the like, they're going to open the email the same way, because outside the email it looks the same. But once they open, how is their behavior? Like, how are they clicking? How are they buying? Sometimes you are talking about something in the email and people are very interested. They're clicking, like you're talking about a product, you're talking about specific features about that. But once they get to the website, they see something completely different. So they are clicking a lot, but they're not buying. So depends on what you're testing, to be honest, and the flow you're talking about. The same thing for campaigns. Depends what you're testing in the campaigns. You're gonna have to look at different things.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's dependent on which flow they're in and actually which email they're at as well. So
Exactly.
maybe a good thing to say is when you're doing a test between emails, have a very clear definition of, is it open rate, click rate, or what are you actually trying to test?
Exactly. And also, you can't want to test everything in the same email. So go slowly. In one email, you test subject line. The other email, you test the content. The other email, the copy, whatever. You change. If you test everything in one email, you're not going to get the results you really want to see, because you won't know what brought better results.
Makes sense. Okay, and just at this point, there's one last question there as well. So you mentioned flows alone or a plateau. So what's the clear sign that you're hitting that plateau? I suppose it's on the last slide there. What's the sign that we're actually hitting that plateau as a suppose it's sending emails and setting it up? How do you know when you need to start sending emails campaigns?
Okay. So you shouldn't just set flows and afterwards you do the campaign. You should be doing both together. Because if you do so, if you just focus on flows and then afterwards you're going to do the campaigns, and then also if you just focused on ads, for example, you bring people into your database and then you start campaigns and flows, like, you're just going to populate there, and then it's going to be harder for you to work with your clients. If you just start everything together, you're actually going to have more engaged people, Yeah, the idea would be to actually, like, I would say, see what you currently have with your flows, then you define what you really need to start flows wise, put priorities there, what's more important, and then you do like one flow together with one campaign, and then you keep doing there. Like I'm saying, if you're one person doing everything alone, prioritize and keep doing both together, because one is going to help with the other. Sometimes
Mhm.
you don't need to set up a flow, and sometimes usually flows have more than one email, so you don't need to set up a whole flow to understand that this type of design doesn't work, for
Mhm.
example. You can just
Okay.
test it with one campaign.
That's good. That's good advice. Okay, thank you very much. That really helps. And keep asking questions in the comment box, lads, and we'll come to them at the end as well, and make sure that we cover everyone's questions. So yeah, so we want to
Yeah,
talk a little bit then when it breaks, Tally. So everyone's kind of, some people here have flows set up. They're sending campaigns, but when
yeah.
does it not work? Like it's my
Okay.
email is not necessarily hitting 30-40% of my revenue. Like why? What's going on?
So here's a problem. Why retention is not 100%? And then I think Tom is going to help us with that, because sometimes people just come to your website. It's not sometimes; it's actually most of the time. They don't leave their email, so you can actually work with them. You can only send abandonment checkup flows, for example, if someone left their emails at some point, or in the past they left their emails and they just came back. Most people, they do not leave emails. And then think for yourself. Whenever I go to a website, I see a product, if I just leave, I'm not leaving my email there. So that's a blind spot with retention. Retention works a lot, but it could be working even better, because most traffic comes from anonymous people, and then you can just get them. You need their email at some point of their story. And here we're talking specifically about first-time customers. We could be getting more. Retention works better with second, third, fourth purchase, because you already had their emails from past purchases.
Hmm.
First purchase, like if they just come and leave, they're not leaving their email anywhere. And it's
Yeah.
very hard for someone that never bought anything to actually leave their email.
Mhm.
They don't know the brand, they don't know anything. Yeah.
They sign up or whatever. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
So
And so
this is, yeah. No. Keep going.
yeah, I was going to say this is one of the key things that we're actually seeing more in our industry now, is that we're trying to get emails, and people come and they would get emails after, but generally it starts before. Like we want to actually build up that brand awareness. We want to actually allow people to understand why they're buying into the brand. I mean, now more than ever, I think things are a little bit tighter from a consumer standpoint. People are going to buy into brands they really care about, and that's something that we want to do more so now than ever. So I
Yeah.
suppose just on, sorry, Tally, do you have anything on that before we move
Yeah,
on?
I was gonna say, imagine what we do with the emails we have. Imagine what we could be doing with all the emails we do not have. If you're already having results with what we have, imagine with all the emails addresses that we do not have, that people do not leave, all those anonymous people that just come and leave. What we could be doing with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There's so much more to it. So I suppose,
Yeah.
Tom, that's really where Opensend comes in, I think, and it's important to kind of give some framing around how Opensend fits in a retention structure, but also a client acquisition structure. So tell us a bit more about that.
If only there was a better way, right? That was a good lead in there, Tally. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I think most people have some misconceptions about identity resolution, and we're going to context shift a bit between acquisition and retention, but I think it's really important to talk about the fact that identity resolution, and specifically Opensend, can serve both of those needs. To Tally's point, the vast majority of a brand's traffic is generally anonymous, and that can come in two different forms. Anonymous users can be net new anonymous folks who have never interacted with your site, they've never purchased, have never left an email. There's also a huge portion of a brand's anonymous traffic that are actually known users, but they're just returning on a device or browser that, I'll pick on Klaviyo, that Klaviyo can't detect, for example. If Tally is a customer of a brand, but she comes back on Safari on her iPhone, how can you leverage identity resolution to send the signals that Klaviyo wants to detect, send those into Klaviyo so you can send out the flows that you know and love? And of course, that you can't trigger and you can't act on what you can't see, right? So the ability to leverage identity resolution to pick up more signals, both signals from net new anonymous users and signals from the returning customers that you want to send retention marketing efforts to, that's where identity resolution steps in. And that's what Opensend is generally here to do. And I'll try to stay on the correct side of the line of talking about identity resolution more broadly versus just Opensend, because I think the practice and the discipline is increasingly important nowadays as more and more traffic is anonymous.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the key things that we've definitely found growing a lot of our brands across Cryptopia and Opes is actually identity resolution, because we're sending so much traffic and people aren't leaving that stuff behind. So, it's been a massive thing for us across the board for sure. Great.
Let me talk about the acquisition use case first. I think most people, when they hear identity resolution, they generally make some assumptions that identity resolution is a pixel that lives on your site. We fire a pixel as soon as somebody gets to the site, and we drop that identity into your ESP for retargeting. And while those principles tend to be true, I think it's important to talk about the options that exist in the landscape and what Opensend does. We focus exclusively on high intent visitors. If I'm running a brand, I recognize that it is much more valuable for me to retarget the person who has been on my site for 90 seconds and visited 3 pages than it is for me to retarget the person who fat thumbed an Instagram ad that came for 10 seconds and then they abandoned. And in fact, that latter strategy of retargeting folks that show no intent has a really high likelihood to be harmful. Those folks that came for 5 seconds and abandoned, not only are they empty calories, not only will they just cause bloat in your number of Klaviyo profiles, those folks are also going to have a higher propensity to report as spam or to unsubscribe, right? And Opensend kind of deals in exclusively the currency of high intent anonymous users or high intent returning users that your current ESP is missing those sessions. So we can pass those through. And because we do that filtering, because we only pass along people that hit our intent parameters, typically, even on the acquisition side, we're seeing 50% open rates, 10% click rates to an audience that would have been completely unattainable without the existence of Opensend or identity resolution previously. This is the thing we're doing. On the acquisition side, most people just generally think, I'm going to drive X amount of web traffic. I'm going to get 3% of those people to either buy or opt into my email program. And I'm going to expect that welcome flow to perform at 90 cents per recipient. And they're taking for granted the fact that you can rapidly increase the rate of that list growth, even by just focusing on the folks that showed meaningful intent. We're going to give you the folks that got to the middle of your funnel. You just work to get them to the bottom of your funnel.
Get them all the way down. We have a great question there actually from Aaron as well. So, I mean, I think you kind of answered it, but maybe go into a little bit more detail. How do we know it's not going to spam? If you're emailing loads of people, because this is the question we get all the time is,
of course,
people come to the site and I haven't given my email. How do I know it's not just going to go to spam boxes?
Beautiful. I'm gonna answer both. How do you know, and what do we do to protect it? So first of all, Aaron, we have direct integrations with all the major ESPs: Klaviyo, Braze, Bloomreach, Iterable, ListTrack. The list goes on and on. And obviously, through those integrations, we're able to pull in all down funnel metrics about the performance of the audience we provide, and that includes click rate, open rate, but of course also spam and subscribe rate. So we encourage people. In fact, we check during our trials that we offer. We check to make sure that we're staying below our benchmarks for spam and unsubscribe rate. I think the interesting question is also how we do it, because Opensend takes a unique approach to that. There are 2 things we do to make sure that we maintain healthy email performance. The first is the filtering that I just talked about. By only giving you high intent folks, those folks have a higher likelihood to positively engage in emails. But when you buy an identity resolution provider, you're buying the quality and maintenance of their identity graph. So one thing that Opensend does is on a weekly basis through automations, we strip our identity graph of any known spam reporters, meaning Tally, I'm gonna pick on you a little bit, but if Tally goes and reports another brand in the Opensend ecosystem as spam, we're going to strip Tally out of our identity graph so as not to expose other brands to the risk of Tally reporting them as spam. We're also going to strip Tally out of our identity graph if she goes 60 days without engaging in other brand emails, right? If Tally is inactive or worse, harmful, why would I pass those along to other folks? So by maintaining our identity graph at the front end and then filtering the traffic that we actually pass to you, we make sure we stay within those benchmarks. And frankly, it's the reason why, like Klaviyo, we were invited to their user conference last September because they monitor our performance on the 600, 700 customers we share with them, and they ensure that we stay below their spam and unsubscribe benchmarks. That was really long-winded, Aaron, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, though, right? You just, long story short, you guys have a list that you keep set safe and make sure it doesn't get too spammy.
That's exactly right. And to show you some of the configuration here. So again, on the acquisition side, as I talk about the net new folks who came to your site that didn't interact with your email pop-up or purchase, how can you filter them to decide who we pass to you? So the most common things brands will do is out of the box, we won't fire our pixel until somebody's been on the site for 55 seconds or more. But most brands that work with us will say, hey, listen, we're not selling $20 socks. We're selling $400 jewelry. How can we focus on folks who spend longer amounts of time on site? So you can say, let's focus on exclusively people who spent 2 minutes on the site and they visited 2 product pages, for example. We're also going to pass through the source URL. Where were those people on the site when we fired our pixel? So that can inform, obviously, more accurate, more relevant retargeting. But also, like to Tally's point, those are signals. People were looking at these collections. How can I be smarter about the campaigns I drop them in the future? But you as a brand control, who do you proverbially want to get stuck in an elevator with? The people who did exactly what on your site you want passed into your ESP, you get to control that to make sure that Opensend never gives you empty calories.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's exactly that control that you're talking about. So it's opening the net, but not too much of that. Which one is the best, would you say? Which is the one you've seen working the best out of these?
90% of customers will focus on 2 things: time on site and the number of viewed pages, right? So if you're a brand, for example, where your homepage is educational in nature, but you can't actually browse products on your homepage, let's make sure that we at least add a second page view for a product page, for example. You can do some deeper configurations, and a lot of brands, for example, will exclude our pixel on their warranty pages, their contact us pages, or customer service pages, because those are not demonstrations of high intent from a user, right? You're not going to go retarget somebody who's just on your warranty page. That's not going to be particularly helpful. So exclude the right pages that are low intent. Make sure you capture people that spent the right amount of time on the right types of pages, and that generally covers 98% of use cases.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's even better nearly than the pop-up that some people might be having on their site. It's actually getting the really high intent users as well.
Yeah, even with this like high intent framework, Tristram, to that question, we have a ton of brands that might go add 10,000 people to their email list through their email pop-up every month. And even with relatively high intent parameters with Opensend, they'll go add another 15 or 20,000 through us. And that's like that list growth. And to be able to drop those people into a welcome flow, into any relevant abandonment flows, and if they engage, drop them into any of your ongoing nurturing. Now, if those identities don't perform after 60 days, purge them. I don't want to cause a bunch of bloat in your Klaviyo instance with profiles that don't perform. But generally speaking, people can go monetize those folks, even the anonymous folks, at $1, $1.50, $2 or more within that first 30 days. And if you can do that, this is a massive fly trap for you.
Yeah, pretty decent ROI. Definitely good to see. So you've done it before with us. I knew this was coming up, but I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that. It's the ROI is significant. So maybe talk us a bit through kind of what we saw with Jane Wynn.
Yeah, so I'm not a graphic designer. Forgive my design of this slide, right? But I wanted to think about Webtopia or Oaks. What mutual customers do we have? And Jane Wynn, if you're not familiar, kind of a purpose-led jewelry brand specifically for women, but they use and have used Opensend for most of the last year. And I wanted to look, for curiosity's sake, just at their first full month with us. So the data that I'm showing here is just their first full month. Now we can get integrated and up and running within 30 minutes for most brands, so it's very quick to install. But Jane Wynn is using us for 2 use cases. One, they're capturing anybody who spends 55 seconds on their site and doesn't interact with their email pop-ups. They're checking with us to see, do we know who those folks are? Are they safe for us to retarget? And if so, we go create profiles for those folks. They are also using us to go pick up sessions from their known users, but sessions that they're missing because Klaviyo is missing those sessions. Like I talked about before, if you come back on Safari, for example, on an iPhone, it's a cookieless browser. Klaviyo is going to miss that. Jane Wynn also uses us to send those signals for abandonment. And just in their first month with us, and now admittedly, this open rate is above our benchmark of 50%. But to this new audience that we provided for them, they got dang near 75% open rate, meaning 75% of those new profiles open an email from them, almost a 9% click rate. And their ROI it's actually north of 40 to 1 just in their first month. And that compounds over time through the efforts that Tally talks about. like good retention marketing to these folks. You get the second order, the third order, but achieving the milestone of getting the first order is often the most important part. That is acquisition, feeding retention there, and that's where we step in. And again, on the retention use case, by picking up those sessions that Klaviyo would otherwise miss, you can't trigger what you don't see. So within we call it our Reconnect product, what we do is we exclusively report on the revenue associated with the flows that we alone triggered. So when I go fire our pixel on our site, we say, all right, this is Tally. There is already an associated Klaviyo profile for Tally. Let's go check with Klaviyo to see if they're seeing this session or not. And in the event that Klaviyo is not seeing that session, we'll say, hey, guess what? Tally abandoned her cart. Go fire off that welcome flow. And we only report on the revenue associated with that. And in like a given month, Jane Wynn, for context, is a brand that I think has 75,000 unique visitors to their site in a given month. In a given month, we'll send them 7,000 to 8,000 signals of their own customers that are coming back to their site, taking meaningful action, but Klaviyo's missing it. So we just give them those signals and let their normal flows take over the rest, and it's monetizing at a super high rate.
Absolutely. It has worked well for them. Go on, Danny.
Tom, by the way, I'm shocked with those numbers. Like, for whoever doesn't know, like, results for emails, 60% open rate. It's very good. They're having here like almost 75%. 1% click rate is good. You had almost 9%, which is like, wow. So
yeah, that's what happens when you focus on only the people that spent a bunch of time browsing your site and then abandoned, right? Now, if we just fired our pixel as soon as somebody got to the site and gave you all those people, these numbers would be a quarter of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's just proof to the point, proof in the pudding. It works. And this is why we're kind of partnering with Opensend as well. So it's making sure that we're working with the very best. So just
let's not take for granted, just to give you some flowers, let's not take for granted that it's also really well executed emails. Opensend doesn't send the emails. It is folks like the geniuses at Oaks and Webtopia and the folks at Jane Wynn that create these flows to make sure they're engaging. If you send a bad email, I can't drive clicks for you if you're sending bad emails with bad CTAs. But if you're pretty confident in your email retargeting and in the flows that you've set up, we're going to see you charge those.
Yeah. Good question there from actually to that very point from Sarah there. She's asking, how do we improve click rates? I suppose that's two level question there, Sarah. I suppose I'll quickly take it and then I'll pass it to Tally and then Tom. I think from a click, I don't know what's going on there. From a click rate standpoint, I think it's going to be two parts. It's going to be content, and it's also going to be who you're actually sending it to. So I think the first thing I'd say is the who we're sending it to, because this is specifically what we're talking about here. I think Tom has kind of explained that we're sending to the very best people, the people who are really showing the high intent, as opposed to just blasting it to every single person. Tally mentioned it earlier on in terms of segmentation. You want to make sure you're segmenting based on behavior rather than batch-based sending. So that's really important. And so, Tally, do you want to talk a bit more about how you improve click rates, maybe from a design standpoint?
The content, if the content is good, people are actually going to click on it. If the content is bad, sometimes people are open and going to leave in the same second. So, for example, if you see a very long email, not designed, text only, you're not going to read that. You're just going to leave. So the content is very important. Not long copy. I love to say benefit driven, because you're actually telling people like why you should be buying this product. For you don't say the price for sure, but like you're explaining why is it worth it for you to buy it? Why do you need this product? So benefit driven. The CTA is very clear all around the email. So you can't just have one CTA all the way in the bottom. It means people have to scroll all the way down to find somewhere to click. So you need many CTAs, very good content, very nice design, because people read with their eyes. If something is beautiful, they're going to have more interesting than if it's not. If it's something boring, long, a copy that, when you do like a generic copy, and then when you read something, you're saying like, oh, they're sending this to so many people. They're not even talking to me. So, and again, those are things that you can test. So if you're not sure if the content is good enough, test if your email is long, send a long versus short email. Test if you should be adding more CTAs. I've seen clients who did have many CTAs, but it was like a very long CTA. So it also, or don't use generic CTAs like shop now. Talk about more about the benefits, like get hydrated now for hydrating product, for example. So many things you can test in your content that's very important to improve click rates. And then we also have the other side of improvement. I think Tom is going to talk better about that.
Yeah. I think you were talking already about it, Tom, just around the who you're sending to. I think was the main thing that was there.
This is the main reason why we run a trial. We run a 14-day trial for anybody that works with Opensend. And what that allows us to do is find the sweet spot for when we're firing our pixel and who we're capturing. So generally in a trial, 1 week in, we're going to touch base, we're going to check in. And if we see that a brand is at a 40% open rate and a 5% click rate, we're going to say, hey, we gotta raise the fence, right? We got to make it harder for people to get captured by Opensend. So the first thing we'll do, Sarah, if you were asking about the Opensend use case, is say, let's take this brand from firing the Opensend pixel after 55 seconds. Let's actually do it after 90 seconds or 120 seconds. Let's give these people this brand a very conservative approach to identity resolution, to only give them the top of the top. If you look at performance curves, if there's this really like big inflection point at about 40 seconds of time on site, where it basically says anybody who spends less than 40 seconds is not going to buy from you. Those people never got to like any level of intent, and it starts to ramp up higher and higher and higher. So we can just slide ourselves higher up on the curve to make sure you're getting the right returns and the right email performance from folks who come to your site.
Yeah. By the way, that's something we've just tested with one of our clients. We sent the same email, but to a completely different audience. And the metrics are just like, we tested it for a month and the metrics were like way better just by like the same email changing to whoever you send it.
Absolutely. It's magical finding new results, sending to bigger audiences and different audiences.
Yeah.
I just want to speak to kind of where this fits in the ecosystem from a direct-to-consumer brand or generally. And so we're clear, with Oaks, we're part of the Webtopia group. So Webtopia do client acquisition and growth strategy, and then Oaks work on retention and lifecycle strategy as well. One of the biggest things that we want to really focus on here is the fact, that when we've got a retention system working, we're increasing the lifetime value of customers. So actually bringing those back and actually over a 6-month period, improving the profit as Talia was saying, then, from that, you can see then your customer acquisition cost tolerance improves. So you can actually start to see you can spend more in a new customer if you know that you're going to make more over the next couple of periods as well. So that's something that, really, really helps. And I think then just on that as well, you can look at your overall business metrics. CFOs love this. Your acquisition scales like a lot more confidently. You're not kind of going, I hope when I spend all this money, I will get a good acquisition cost. You've got a backup. You got the customers that are buying from you already. So if you've got a launch or if you've got people you want to try and bring back, this allows you to really grow your company across the board. So it's massively important to get this right. I mean, look, I'm preaching to convert it here a little bit, but I think it's important to kind of highlight that, this is more than just getting a good retention system. It's important to the entire business that you're running. So just to highlight the kind of key takeaways there. So it's a system, not a channel. Don't just look at this as our Klaviyo bill, our Opensend bill, or whatever the bill is for the retention. You're trying to build up a system and part of your business. It's something you can depend on over and over again if you get it right. Follow the process we were talking about earlier on, who you're sending to and how you're sending it to it. Set the foundation, get those flows sorted. So when we start working with folks, we make sure that their flows are sorted, and we start with a project to make sure that your flows are in the right place. Then we make sure you're compounding the value on campaigns. So we talked about segmentation and campaign messaging and everything else, but that's going to be really important. And then, I suppose, making sure that you're not just starting after the person purchases, but before as well. So that, as I said, identity resolution is something that we want to build the retention, actually get that messaging to them before they start buying as well, which is important. And then, they working the two of them together and not just kind of scaling to the moon and then hopefully you get the retention back. If you've got a brand where you've got kind of a subscription model, which I know a couple of people who signed up have subscription models, we work with quite a few of those. And one of the things we've seen across the board is they like to kind of scale and then pull back. And then when they're pulling back, they're letting those people that they've bought fill back up the cash flow as well. So we've got quite a lot of experience in that. And I think that's something that we're, seeing a lot of success with, that kind of wave motion, as a want of a better phrase. But yeah, I think, look, the key takeaway here is build a system, not trying to short-term save this, not trying to do little tactics. These tactics are part of a bigger system, so it's really important to call that out. So yeah, I hope everyone kind of got everything they're looking for today. We're here. We'll hang on for another few minutes if you have any questions. But that's everything we have. And yeah, thanks for attending, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your day if I don't get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tris.
No problem at all. I think we answered a lot of the questions throughout the call, so we should be good to head off. Thanks, Julie. Great. Okay. Yeah. Listen. Thanks a mil, guys. And we have our emails. We'll email this out as well. And if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks a mil.
All right. Be well.